Decorated army generals falling from grace in connection with racy scandals is becoming an alarming trend in Washington. The career of the current commander in Afghanistan is now in jeopardy after he became entangled in the case that led to the resignation of CIA Chief David Petraeus. Petraeus had to quit after revelations of an affair with his biographer. They emerged as a result of a probe launched after complaints by a Florida socialite who received many emails she said amounted to harassment. Now, General Allen, who succeeded Petraeus in Afghanistan, is also under investigation over inappropriate communications with the very woman who started it all. We can now go live to Kabul and talk to RT's Lucy Kafanov, who is in the Afghan capital now. Lucy, good to see you. What's been the response to the scandal, as we know, so far in Afghanistan?
Well, it certainly is in the headlines, as you can see in the papers here in Afghanistan. Petraeus, star on battlefield, felled at CIA by an affair. The situation, the reaction on the ground has been one of outrage. People are really quite confused by this whole scandal. One of the comments that I heard from a person who wished to be anonymous in the Foreign Ministry's office was they found it really indicative of how not well the Afghan war effort is going in terms of U.S. policy. If the top general in charge of it had time to send 20 to 30,000 pages worth of inappropriate emails. People here have also expressed some confusion as to why these kinds of scandals would force these top men to resign and not, for example, the scandals that have really resonated among the people here on the ground. For example, the tragic massacre by a U.S. soldier of 16 civilians here in Afghanistan, the burnings of the Quran by officials here, as well as regular policies like, for example, night raids, which are so controversial here that often result in the deaths of civilians. So people are quite confused by this scandal. They're not quite sure what implications it'll have on the U.S. war effort here in Afghanistan. And of course, it's coming on the heels of very important talks between the U.S. and Afghanistan. The two countries have been in negotiations over what the U.S. will do with the remainder of its 68,000 troops that are here, that are due to withdraw by the 2014 deadline. Some analysts that I've spoken to on the ground here in Kabul think that this embarrassing scandal will really be sort of a bargaining chip for some factions in Afghanistan, and to be able to effectively get more of what they want, to say, well, look, you guys here in the U.S. Military top brass don't necessarily have the credibility to pull off certain policy options, and that's really been the concern as one of the fallouts of the scandal. But of course, if we look at the big picture in terms of U.S. policy in Afghanistan, it really has been crisis after crisis. It's not just these embarrassing resignations of Petraeus and the implication of General Allen. We've seen the U.S. spend nearly $600 billion in its 11-year effort in Afghanistan. The insurgency, the Taliban insurgency, has largely remained unbowed by that. We've also seen the U.S. Effectively shifting towards other policies, for example, trying to train Afghan soldiers to take over after 2014, and that too has been marred by scandal, with nearly 54 Americans being killed in the so-called green on blue attacks, showing that the U.S. Influence is really waning here in this country. Another concern is, of course, the implication on the morale of the troops here, the American troops, who are not necessarily welcomed in this country. They're not. This scandal is not going to help them continue to operate on the ground. And there's also the concern that the U.S. is really shifting from a person-based policy to a robotic policy. What I'm, of course, referring to is the drone strikes. Afghanistan has seen 333 drone strikes in the past year alone. That's more than Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen combined. And so these are really the true issues that are going to be resonating on the ground with Afghans, not so much the scandal in itself. All the scandal really does is, unfortunately, undermine credibility by the U.S. commanders here. This is from what I've heard from people on the ground. And
one would imagine also further undermining troop morale where you are as well. RT's Lucy Kafanov there in the Afghan capital. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Sriram Chalia from the Jindal School of International Affairs in India, he says the so-called commander's curse is a reflection of wider U.S. failure in Afghanistan.
You have to look at it in the perspective of long wars and the stress of command and of failure and of cover-up. This definitely has implications for the war that's going on there, as well as the incident in Libya when the U.S. ambassador was killed recently. All of these are connected, and the timing. There's also institutional rivalry, quite a few angles to this. The administration needs to turn as Obama said at his victory on re-election day, that we are going to end a decade or long of war. How are we going to end it unless some generals are smeared? I don't know. I mean, we need to explore how the public relations disaster that's happening right now and unraveling is related to the larger political issue about the disasters of these wars and the recriminations that are bound to occur at the end of every major war like this, which did not yield anything in the form of victory or a concrete outcome for the United States.